My name is Jocelyn, and for the longest time the world knew me as the patient of Dr. Alistair Finch. If you're a part of a certain world, a world of quiet money and loud anxieties, you know his name. He was more than a psychologist. He was a brand. Hoster feigned. His books on emotional architecture lined the shelves of every self-aware executive in the city. His wait list was a testament to his reputation as a builder of broken minds. For 2 years he was my architect, and for 2 years he was systematically demolishing me. If you're watching this, it probably helps to know you're not alone. So hit that like button, and let me know I'm not just screaming into the void. This story is for anyone who has ever been told that their gut feeling was a symptom of a disease. It started with a whisper, the kind of insidious suggestion that feels like your own thought. He'd say things like, "Your memory of that event seems colored by a lot of emotion, Jocelyn. Are we sure it happened exactly as you recall?" He had this way of tilting his head, a gesture of profound, gentle concern that felt like a warm blanket. Only later did I realize it was a weight, pressing down. My brother Marcus was the topic that came up most often. Marcus, my older brother by 10 years, the steady, reliable one. The one who managed the family trust after our parents were gone. The one who always looked at my life, my software company, my late nights, my passionate, chaotic way of building things, with an air of weary paternalism. "He's just worried, Jocelyn," Dr. Finch would murmur, the leather of his Eames chair sighing with him. In his world, a man's control was concern. A woman's intuition was paranoia. The turning point, the moment the whisper became a siren in my own head, was a single sentence. We were discussing my company, a boutique cybersecurity firm I had built from the ground up. It was my life's work, my baby. I was talking about a potential merger, feeling anxious and overwhelmed. Dr. Finch leaned forward, his polished brogues reflecting the lamplight. He said, "You carry so much, Jocelyn. A brilliant mind like yours is a delicate instrument. Sometimes, for it to play its best music, it needs someone else to handle the carrying case." He suggested, so gently, that giving Marcus power of attorney over my finances, just temporarily, would free up my cognitive resources. It wasn't a demand, it was a prescription. But here's the thing about people who work in cybersecurity. We don't just build walls for others. We live with a heightened awareness of backdoors. We understand that the most devastating breach often comes from a trusted user. That night, I went home, and the word paranoia echoed in my head. They both used it so often. "You're being paranoid, Jocelyn." It was a chorus they sang in harmony, so I decided to lean into it. I decided to treat my own life like a system under threat. I bought a ghost keylogger, a simple USB stick that looks like a thumb drive, and I installed it on my own laptop. My personal laptop, the one I used for everything from therapy notes to emails with Marcus. I told myself it was a test. If I was wrong, if I was truly unstable, then I would check myself into the clinic. Dr. Finch had once so helpfully suggested, but if I was right, well, I didn't let myself think about that. 3 weeks later, I had my answer. It wasn't in a therapy session with its carefully curated words. It was in the raw, unfiltered text of an email log. An email from Dr. Alistair Finch to my brother Marcus. The subject line was simply asset management. My heart didn't drop. It just stopped. Frozen in my chest, I read the words and the world fell away. My celebrated psychologist, Dr. Alistair Finch, called me a fragile bird with a golden egg. My brother Marcus replied that the cage was almost ready. He had drafted the power of attorney documents. They were discussing the timeline for presenting them to me, how to best leverage my emotional distress to get my signature. They were planning how to dismantle my life, my company, my future, under the guise of protecting me from myself. The transcript of that conversation, and every other message they exchanged, is now in a sealed envelope, hand-delivered by my lawyer to the State Licensing Board for Psychology. They thought they were building a cage. They didn't realize they were just handing me the blueprint. The screen of my laptop was a gash of white light in my dark apartment. The words on it seemed to vibrate, to hum with a malevolent energy. I read them again and again. Each reading was like a fresh stab wound, but with every wound the shock bled out, and something else began to fill the space. A cold, crystalline clarity. It's a strange feeling to have your worst fears validated. For 2 years I had existed in a fog of self-doubt, a carefully constructed labyrinth, where every path I took to find myself led back to the conclusion that I was lost. Dr. Finch was the architect of that maze, and Marcus was the groundskeeper, dutifully trimming the hedges to keep me trapped. I scrolled through the logs. It wasn't just one email. It was months of them, a slow, methodical campaign. It was all there, in stark, black and white text. Chats about my episodes, my erratic behavior. They were twisting my grief over my mother's death, a grief I had come to Dr. Finch to process, into a narrative of instability. I had told him, in the sacred trust of that room, that sometimes I felt overwhelmed by running my company alone. He had translated that to Marcus as, "She's cracking under the pressure." I had confessed a deep-seated fear of failure, the classic imposter syndrome that haunts so many founders. He had repackaged it as, "She has a tenuous grip on reality." I pushed back from my desk, my chair rolling silently on the hardwood floor. My body felt disconnected from myself, a vessel piloted by a cold, distant fury. I walked to the window and looked down at the city lights, a glittering, indifferent tapestry. For so long, I had looked at those lights and felt small, a single flickering bulb in a sea of brilliance. Now I saw it differently. I saw a network, a system of inputs and outputs, of power grids and vulnerabilities. And for the first time in 2 years, I wasn't the vulnerability. I was the system administrator. My mind started to flash back, stitching together the memories, but this time with the key, the legend that decoded everything. I remembered a dinner with Marcus about 6 months ago. He'd been so solicitous, so concerned. "Jocelyn, you look tired," he'd said, his hand covering mine on the table. In sixth sen, I covering mine on the table. It had felt warm then. Now I felt the phantom chill of a predator. He had asked about Aura Security, my company, probing questions about our financials, our major clients, our intellectual property. I had thought he was finally taking an interest, finally seeing me as a peer. I now realized he wasn't taking an interest. He was taking inventory. The keylogger transcripts showed that the very next day he had emailed Dr. Finch a summary of my company's valuation, with the note, "The golden egg is even bigger than we thought." Then there was the memory of a session with Dr. Finch, just after I'd landed a massive contract with a European tech conglomerate. It was the biggest win in my company's history. I should have been ecstatic. Instead, I was a bundle of nerves, terrified I wouldn't deliver. I confessed this to him. I told him I felt like a fraud. He had nodded, his expression a perfect mask of empathy. "It's a heavy crown to wear, Jocelyn," he had said. "Perhaps it's time you let someone help you bear the weight." He had planted the seed of the power of attorney that very day, and I had been too lost in my own self-doubt to see the spade in his hand. This wasn't just about money. It was about my identity. Aura Security wasn't just an asset. It was the tangible proof that I could build something strong, something vital, from nothing. I started it in my garage with 2 servers, and an idea that the best security wasn't about bigger walls, but smarter systems that could identify a threat before it even knocked on the door. It was an ethos, an intuition-based model. It was in essence me, codified, and they were trying to steal it. The keylogger revealed the endgame. Marcus, armed with power of attorney, would sell my company to a monolithic competitor, a corporate behemoth I had outmaneuvered and out-innovated for years. He'd get a fat commission and a seat on their board. Finch would get a consulting fee for his role in the transition. They would call it a rescue, a mercy. They would sell my life's work for parts and tell the world they did it to save me. I slid down to the floor, my back against the cool glass of the window. The cold fury began to recede, replaced by a deep, shuddering ache. This was my brother, the boy who taught me how to ride a bike, who held my hand at our father's funeral. The betrayal was so profound, so elemental, it felt like a tectonic plate shifting inside me. I let myself feel it. I had to. I couldn't build a fortress on a fault line. The tears came, hot and silent. They weren't tears of weakness or instability. They were tears of grief. I was mourning the brother I thought I had. I was mourning the trust I had so freely given to a man who was supposed to be my healer. I cried for the woman who had walked into that office 2 years ago, genuinely seeking help, only to be led into a gilded cage. I don't know how long I sat there. An hour, maybe two. The city lights blurred into long, shimmering streaks. Then, through the haze of grief, a different memory surfaced. It was my mother. She was in her garden, her hands covered in dirt, her face lit by the setting sun. I was a teenager, complaining about something, some boy who had made me feel small. She had stopped her work, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Jocelyn, never let anyone else tell you the story of who you are, especially not a man who benefits from a smaller version of you." The memory was so vivid, I could almost smell the soil and the roses. It was the catalyst, the switch that flipped. The grief remained, but it was no longer an anchor. It was fuel. I stood up, my legs stiff. I walked back to the desk, no longer a victim surveying the scene of the crime, but an investigator. My breakdown was over. My resolve was forged. It wasn't about revenge. I kept telling myself that. It's a phrase that would become a mantra, a shield. It wasn't about revenge. It was about a systems correction. My life had been compromised by two malicious actors. They had exploited a vulnerability, my grief, my trust. Now, I was going to patch the vulnerability and eject the intruders permanently. I pulled up a fresh document. My fingers flew across the keyboard, not with the frantic energy of panic, but with the focused precision of a programmer, writing clean, efficient code. I began to outline a plan, a quiet, methodical, and utterly devastating plan. They thought I was a fragile bird. They were about to find out I was the ornithologist who wrote the book on migratory patterns, predatory behavior, and the precise tensile strength of cage bars. They had miscalculated, not just my stability, but my core competency. And in my world, a miscalculation of that magnitude wasn't just a mistake. It was an extinction-level event. The foundation of any good strategy isn't rage, it's foresight. My so-called paranoia had given me the keylogger transcript, the undeniable proof. That was my leverage. But leverage is useless without a plan to apply it. For the next 48 hours, I barely slept. My apartment transformed into a war room. The hum of my laptop was the only sound, a steady companion to the furious typing that filled the silence. This was my element. In the face of overwhelming emotional chaos, I found my anchor in logistical precision. My first step was to secure my own infrastructure. This wasn't just about the money, it was about control. Marcus had his name on a joint checking account with me, a relic from when he helped manage our parents' estate. It was a minor account, but it was a foothold, a backdoor he could use to monitor my activity. Using my knowledge of banking security protocols, I initiated a transfer of 99% of the funds to a new account at a different institution, an account opened entirely online with multi-factor authentication, tied to a burn phone I'd bought for cash that afternoon. The amount was just under the $10,000 threshold that would trigger an automatic federal flag. It was a small, clean move, the digital equivalent of a silent step in a quiet house. Next, I tackled my company, Aura Security. The threat wasn't just that Marcus wanted to sell it. It was that he was colluding with a specific buyer, Omnicorp. Omnicorp was everything I had defined my company against. They were a lumbering giant, buying up innovative startups and assimilating their tech, often gutting the teams and cultures that made them special in the first place. The keylogger transcripts contained emails between Marcus and an executive at Omnicorp, a man named Gerald Thorne. They were discussing deal structures, contingent on Marcus securing power of attorney. They were already dividing the spoils. My spoils. I knew I couldn't just fight them on that front. I had to make Aura Security untouchable by them. For the past year, I had been developing a new proprietary system, codenamed Project Chimera. It was a revolutionary piece of threat detection software that didn't just react to attacks, but learned to predict them based on subtle network fluctuations. It was the future of my company, its most valuable asset, and it was still entirely off the books, known only to me and my lead developer, a quiet genius named Ben. I called Ben for a video conference. Ben had been with me from the garage and two servers days. He was loyal, brilliant, and deeply skeptical of the corporate world. He looked tired on the screen, his face illuminated by the glow of his monitor. I didn't tell him everything. I didn't mention my brother or my therapist. In my world, information is compartmentalized. Need to know. I simply said, Ben, we're accelerating the timeline on Chimera. We're spinning it off. His eyebrows shot up. A spin-off? Jocelyn, it's not ready for prime time. I know, I replied, my voice calm and even. We're not taking it to market. We're putting it in a vault. I explained my plan. We would form a new, independent shell corporation, registered in Delaware for its robust corporate privacy laws. The ownership of Project Chimera's intellectual property would be legally transferred to this new entity. Aura Security would retain an exclusive but revocable license to use the technology. I would be the sole owner of the shell corporation. It was a firewall, a legal and financial one. If Marcus ever got control of Aura, he would get the car, but I would still hold the keys to the engine. He could sell the brand, the client list, the office furniture, but he couldn't sell the future. Ben listened, his expression shifting from confusion to a slow, dawning understanding. He didn't ask why, he just nodded. Okay, he said. What do you need from me? That was Ben. No drama, just execution. His trust was a balm on the raw wound of my brother's betrayal. It reminded me that not all relationships were transactional. Some were built on shared work, mutual respect. While I handled the legal paperwork online, using a service I trusted, Ben worked tirelessly to scrub any mention of Chimera from Aura's servers, migrating the core code to a new, encrypted, air-gapped repository that only he and I could access. The third and most crucial piece of the plan was bringing in a professional. My expertise was in digital fortifications, not legal warfare. I knew I needed an ally, someone who could navigate the labyrinth of the law and the ethics boards. I thought back over my professional contacts. Not the high-powered corporate lawyers who hobnobbed with the Omnicorp vultures. I needed someone different, someone sharper. My mind landed on Anya Sharma. I had met her a year ago at a Women in Tech conference. She was a panelist on a talk about protecting intellectual property. She was young, fiercely intelligent, and had a reputation for being a shark who swam in the quiet depths, not the bloody chum of the surface. She ran her own small firm, specializing in tech law, and as she had put it, complex personal disputes. I found her number and called. It was a Saturday. She picked up on the second ring. Anya, it's Jocelyn Evans. We met last year. I have a situation. I remember you, Jocelyn. Aura Security. You gave that killer talk on predictive threat analysis. What's the situation? Her voice was crisp, direct. No wasted pleasantries. I appreciated that. I need to hire you, I said, and I need absolute discretion. I sent her a single password-protected file. It contained one of the most damning email exchanges between Finch and Marcus. I wrote, "This is a sample. The full dataset is significantly larger." There was silence on the line for about 5 minutes. I could picture her, reading it, her sharp mind processing the implications. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. There was a new edge to it, a cold fire. "Jocelyn," she said, "where are you right now?" I told her I was at my apartment. "Be there in an hour," she said. "And don't talk to anyone. Don't email anyone. Don't even order a pizza. We're going dark." When Anya arrived, she was exactly as I remembered. Impeccable blazer, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and an aura of controlled intensity. She walked in, took one look at my setup. The multiple screens, the printouts, the whiteboard covered in diagrams, and nodded. "Good. You're a builder. I like that." She didn't coddle me. She didn't offer platitudes or sympathy. She treated the situation like a security breach, a problem to be analyzed and solved. We spent the next 6 hours going through everything. The keylogger transcripts, the the financial records, the structure of my company, my relationship with Marcus, my history with Dr. Finch. I laid it all bare. It was like lancing a wound, painful but necessary. Anya was methodical. She separated the issues into two distinct theaters of operation. Theater 1, the professional misconduct. "That's Dr. Finch," she said, pointing to a stack of printed emails. "This is a 5-alarm fire for him. The evidence is pristine. A text-based confession. He's not just going to lose his license. If we push it, he could face criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud. It's a kill shot." Theater 2, the fraternal betrayal. "That's Marcus. This is more delicate," she explained. "Family law is messy. He hasn't technically done anything illegal yet. He's conspired to, but the crime is inchoate. Our goal here isn't to put him in jail. Our goal is to surgically remove him from your life, your finances, and your company, and to ensure he can never ever be a threat again." The plan she devised was brilliant in its simplicity and its brutality. We would go for the headshot first, a formal complaint to the state licensing board for psychology, not an email. A hand-delivered package from her, a legal professional, containing the full, unredacted transcript, cataloged and indexed, with a cover letter that was a masterpiece of controlled legal fury. This move, she explained, would trigger an immediate high-priority investigation. It would bypass the usual bureaucratic sludge. They can't ignore a smoking gun this hot. Simultaneously, she would draft what she called a severance agreement for Marcus. It would be a legal document that would require him to relinquish any and all claims to our parents' remaining trust, to sign away any future power of attorney rights, and to agree to a comprehensive non-disclosure and non-contact clause. "Why would he sign it?" I asked. "Because we won't show it to him yet," she said, a thin, dangerous smile on her face. "We will let the grenade we throw at Dr. Finch send shrapnel his way first. He's a passenger in Finch's car. When the car hits the wall, he'll be desperate. He'll be terrified. And we will be there to offer him the only available exit. An exit that costs him everything he thought he was going to get, but saves him from the wreckage." It was a quiet coup, planned in the glow of a laptop screen. By the time the sun came up on Monday morning, the documents were drafted. The shell company for Project Chimera was legally formed. The complaint was sealed in a courier's pouch. I had fortified my digital life, my finances, and my company's future. I had my ally. I had my leverage. The secret plan was complete. The paranoia they had tried to instill in me had been my shield. Now, the foresight it had given me was about to become my sword. The silence was about to be broken, not by my screams, but by the sound of their world collapsing. The first move of a quiet war is never a cannon shot. It's a whisper in the right ear, a letter delivered to the right address. On Monday morning, at precisely 9 a.m., a legal courier, dispatched by Anya, walked into the administrative offices of the State Board of Psychology. He handed over a thick, sealed envelope. Inside was the dossier, the transcript, the evidence. Anya had included a note making it clear that a copy of the same dossier was being held in escrow, to be released to multiple media outlets, if the board did not take immediate and decisive action. It was a subtle but firm application of pressure, a plausible inaccuracy, perhaps, to believe a state board would act so quickly, but with digital evidence this damning. The normal rules of bureaucratic inertia are often suspended. We were counting on the one thing that motivates administrators more than rules: fear of a public scandal. I didn't have to wait long. The keylogger on my laptop was still active, a silent digital sentinel. It was my window into their panic. At 3:15 p.m. on Tuesday, a new email popped into Dr. Finch's inbox. The subject line was cold and official: formal notice of investigation, case #734B. My case number. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage of my own making. I watched, in real time, as he opened it. The log showed his cursor hovering, motionless, for almost a full minute. I could almost feel his world tilting on its axis. Less than 5 minutes later, his fingers flew across the keyboard. An email to Marcus. The message was short: frantic. Call me. Urgent. They've been contacted. Marcus, who was in a meeting according to his work calendar, a calendar I still had access to from a shared family account I had never been removed from, didn't reply via email. But about 15 minutes later, a new chat log appeared. They had moved to an encrypted messaging app, thinking it was secure. But the keylogger didn't care about the app's encryption. It cared about the physical keystrokes on the laptop's keyboard. It captured everything. Finch, she knows. She has to know. How could she know? Marcus, calm down, Alistair. It's impossible. She's a mess. She probably had a paranoid episode and made a rambling complaint. They have to investigate everything. It's just procedure. Finch, this wasn't a rambling complaint, Marcus. This was a formal notice. They cited substantial and credible evidence. That's not the language they use for a standard patient grievance. They have something. Marcus, what could they have? Our emails. Don't be ridiculous. She has no access to that. You need to hold your nerve. Did you get the POA documents signed? Finch, no. She canceled her session for this week. Said she had a work emergency. I thought it was just another one of her spirals. Marcus, find her. Get her in your office. We need to control the narrative. We stick to the story. She is unwell. We are concerned. We are acting in her best interest. It's our word against a disturbed woman's. Who are they going to believe? Reading their exchange was like watching sharks in a tank, who have just realized the glass is cracking. Their arrogance was still there, but it was brittle now, shot through with veins of panic. Marcus's condescension, his utter dismissal of my capacity, was galling, but it was also his greatest weakness. He couldn't conceive of a world where I was not the fragile, unstable creature they had decided I was. He was so busy looking for the emotional woman, he couldn't see the competent professional moving pieces on the board. The next day, the second phase of the silent takeover began. Marcus went to the bank. He tried to pull a significant sum from the joint account, the one I had drained. Anya had predicted this. He likely intended to use it for a retainer for his own lawyer, just in case. He was of some big cave, Yuandakand for his own lawyer, just in case. The keylogger couldn't tell me what happened inside the bank, but it did capture the furious email he typed out to his personal banker on his laptop later that day. Subject: unauthorized withdrawal. He wrote that there had been a major error, that funds were missing, and that his sister, Jocelyn, who was currently unwell, might have been manipulated into moving the money. He demanded the bank freeze the account and trace the transfer. The banker's reply, logged a few hours later, was a masterpiece of corporate stonewalling. Due to privacy regulations and the formal dispute filed by the other account holder, Miss Evans, they could not disclose any information or take any action without her direct, written consent. The digital door had slammed shut on his fingers. His panic escalated. He tried to call me. My phone, a new number he didn't have, stayed silent. He left voicemails on my old phone, which I listened to from a cloud backup, his voice shifting from feigned concern to frustration, then to outright anger. Jocelyn, pick up the phone. This is ridiculous. What have you done? Meanwhile, the shrapnel from the grenade thrown at Dr. Finch was beginning to hit Marcus with full force. Anya received a call from a lawyer representing Finch. He was in full damage control mode. His attorney was trying to feel out our position, hinting at a misunderstanding, a misinterpretation of his therapeutic methods. Anya was polite, professional, and utterly immovable. She simply stated that her client was considering all her legal options, including civil and criminal proceedings, and that the evidence was, in her words, mathematically conclusive. The most satisfying moment came on Friday afternoon. A new email arrived for Dr. Finch. It was from his professional liability insurance carrier. They were formally notifying him that, based on the preliminary findings of the state board's emergency review, they were suspending his coverage effective immediately. This was the kill shot Anya had predicted. Without insurance, he couldn't legally practice. He couldn't see patients. His entire business, his entire identity, was built on that license and that insurance. In the space of 5 days, he had gone from a celebrated psychologist to an uninsurable pariah. The keylogger captured his desolate one-sentence email to Marcus. "It's over." Marcus's reply was a string of furious misspelled words. "What do you mean it's over? Fix it. We had a plan, but the plan was theirs, and the reality was mine. They had architected my downfall in the shadows, and I had engineered their collapse in the quiet, undeniable light of their own words." The silent takeover was nearly complete. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't confronted anyone. I had simply done what I do best. I had analyzed a compromised system, identified the malicious code, and written a script to quarantine and delete it. Their panic was the sign that the program was running perfectly. The fallout from Dr. Finch's license suspension was swift and brutal. In the small, interconnected world he inhabited, professional ruin is a spectator sport. Anya had, with surgical precision, leaked the fact of the suspension, not the details, just the fact, to a well-connected legal blogger. It was all it took. The whispers started. Finch's office phone began to ring incessantly, not with new clients, but with current ones canceling appointments, demanding their records, their voices laced with the fear that his help had been a form of poison. His celebrated practice, the one with the 6-month waitlist, was imploding in a matter of days. He made one last, desperate countermove. It was clumsy and predictable. An anonymous source fed a story to a local gossip website, painting a picture of a brilliant, compassionate psychologist being targeted by a troubled and vindictive former patient. The article didn't name me, but the details were specific enough. It mentioned a tech heiress with a history of erratic behavior following the death of her parents. It was a thinly veiled attempt to poison the well, to reframe my valid complaint as the ravings of an unstable woman. It was the very narrative they had tried to build for 2 years, but they underestimated Anya. She was prepared for this. Within an hour of the article going live, the gossip site's editor received a letter from her office. It was not a request for a retraction. It was a formal notice of intent to sue for defamation, not just the website, but the editor personally. The letter also mentioned, almost as an aside, that Anya's firm had retained a team of forensic digital investigators to trace the source of the anonymous leak. The article was taken down in 45 minutes. A desperate bluff had been called with overwhelming force. Now the full weight of the collapse fell squarely on Marcus. His co-conspirator was neutralized, his reputation in tatters. His access to my finances was severed. His plan to sell my company was a fantasy. He was left with nothing but his own panic. And that's when he showed up at my door. I was expecting it. After 2 days of his calls going to a dead voicemail box, I knew he would escalate. My building has good security, but I had told the front desk he was my brother, and not to stop him. I wanted this to happen. My security system, the same one that protected my apartment from intruders, was now set to record everything, audio and video. He didn't knock. He hammered on the door, his fists making the wood shudder. "Jocelyn, I know you're in there. Open this door right now." I watched him on the monitor, a live feed on my tablet. His face was blotchy, his hair disheveled. The mask of the calm, concerned older brother had been ripped away, revealing the desperate, entitled man underneath. He looked nothing like the person who had held my hand at our father's funeral. He looked like a stranger, a dangerous one. I didn't answer. I just sat on my sofa, watching the screen, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm. "Jocelyn, for God's sake," he yelled, his voice cracking. "People are calling me. Alistair is ruined." "Hidu, what did you do?" His question was so revealing. Not, "What happened?" "Hidu, what did you do?" He still saw me as the agent of his misfortune, not his own choices. He kept yelling for several minutes. He pleaded. He threatened. He tried to appeal to our shared history, our parents. He even tried to gaslight me one last time through a solid wood door. "You're not well, Josie. You don't know what you're doing. Let me in. Let me help you." Finally, his energy spent, he just slumped against the door, his forehead pressed to the wood. I could hear him breathing, ragged and broken. Then a final, whispered plea. Please, Josie. I'm your brother. I never opened the door. The recording captured every word, every threat, every pathetic plea. It was the final piece of evidence Anya needed. The power had shifted completely. They had started this by trying to declare me incompetent, a fragile bird who couldn't manage her own life. Now, one of them was professionally destroyed, and the other was a desperate man begging on a doorstep, his every word a nail in his own coffin. He thought he was at my door, but he was really at Anya's, and she was about to welcome him in. The final meeting did not take place in a sterile courtroom or a high-rise office with a view. Anya chose a neutral space, a small, soulless conference room in a legal arbitration center downtown. It was a place with no history, no power dynamics embedded in the furniture. It was a blank slate, and on it, a new reality would be written. I walked in with Anya. I was wearing a simple, dark gray dress. I felt a profound sense of calm, the kind that comes after a violent storm has passed, leaving the air clean and still. Across the table sat Dr. Alistair Finch and my brother Marcus. The change in them was startling. Finch, who had always been the picture of tailored, confident elegance, looked like a collapsed building. His suit was rumpled, his face was pale and puffy, and he couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at a fixed point on the polished table, as if it held the secrets to his salvation. Marcus was different. He was vibrating with a coiled, resentful energy. He shot me a look of pure hatred, the look of a man who has been robbed of something he believes is his by right. He still didn't get it. He still thought he was the victim. Their lawyer, a tired-looking man who clearly knew he had been dealt a losing hand, began with a weak opening gambit about healing family divisions and finding a path forward. Anya let him finish. She didn't interrupt. She simply waited, her hands folded neatly on the table in front of her. When he was done, she didn't address him. She looked directly at Finch and Marcus. "Let's dispense with the pleasantries," she said, her voice quiet, but carrying the density of a black hole. "We are not here to negotiate. We are here to read you the terms of your surrender." She slid 2 documents across the table, one for each of them. My terms. For Finch, it was simple. He would voluntarily and permanently surrender his license to practice psychology in this state and any other. He would sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. In exchange, I would not pursue criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud and would not file a civil suit for damages. It was a mercy, and by the desperate way he reached for the pen, he knew it. The document for Marcus was thicker. He was to sign away any and all current and future rights to our parents' trust. He was to relinquish any claim, now or ever, to power of attorney over my person or my estate. He was to dissolve the joint accounts and sign over any remaining shared property, and he was to adhere to a strict, permanent non-contact and non-disclosure agreement. He was to be legally erased from my life. He stared at it, his face turning a dark, mottled red. "This is insane." He spat the words out. "I'm not signing this. This is theft." Anya didn't flinch. She simply reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small tablet. She placed it on the table and pressed play. It was the security footage from my apartment door. His voice, tinny and distorted through the small speakers, filled the silent room. His threats, his pleading, his confession that Alistair was ruined. When it was over, Anya turned the screen off. "That," she said calmly, "is Exhibit A in the criminal complaint for harassment and attempted coercion. We will file this afternoon, if you do not sign. We also have the keylogger transcripts, detailing your collusion with Mr. Finch and your conspiracy with Omnicorp. I've taken the liberty of CCing Omnicorp's general counsel on my preparatory notes. They are very interested to learn that one of their executives was conspiring to acquire a company via illicitly obtained power of attorney. I imagine they will be severing ties with you and Mr. Thorne quite soon." The fight went out of Marcus's eyes. It was like watching a light switch being flicked off. He was beaten. He knew it. The whole intricate web he had woven had been turned into a net to trap him. He picked up the pen, his hand shaking so badly he could barely sign his name. He didn't look at me. He signed the papers that turned him from my brother into a legal abstraction. a name on a restraining order. I stood up. I had said nothing the entire time. I looked at Finch, who was still staring at the table. Then I looked at Marcus, who was now staring at his own useless signature. I thought of 100 things I could say, 100 scathing remarks, 100 ways to pour salt in the wounds they had dug for themselves. But I didn't. All that noise was their world, not mine. My victory was in the silence. I turned and walked out of the room. Anya followed a moment later. It was over. It wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration, restoring my name, my security, my sanity. It was about taking the story of my life back from the men who had tried to rewrite it. A week later, I was in my own conference room, at the head of my own table. My team was around me, including Ben, who gave me a small, knowing smile. We were finalizing the launch of a new suite of services, built around the now patented Project Chimera. Our biggest client, the European conglomerate I had been so anxious about, had just signed an expanded 7-figure contract. They weren't just buying our services, they were investing in our vision. They were investing in me. The new reality was quiet. It was focused. It was mine. The ghosts of Alistair Finch and Marcus Evans were gone, banished not by anger, but by airtight legal documents and their own self-inflicted ruin. In a moment of private, ironic satisfaction, I had named one of the core algorithms in Chimera the Finch Protocol. It was a piece of code designed to detect and isolate malicious actors, masquerading as trusted users. It felt fitting. It was a scar, repurposed into a shield. The world is full of people who will try to tell you who you are. They will try to shrink you to fit their own narrative, to make you smaller so they can feel bigger. They will call your intuition anxiety. They will call your foresight paranoia. They will hand you a diagnosis when what you really need is a mirror. For 2 years, I let 2 men I trusted convince me that the reflection I saw of myself was distorted. They tried to build a cage for me, using my own mind as the bars. But they forgot one thing. I'm an architect. I'm a builder. I don't just know how cages are built. I know their structural weaknesses. I know where to find the stress fractures. And most importantly, I know exactly where the lock is. My paranoia wasn't a symptom. It was a security scan. It was my own internal system running a diagnostic on a credible threat. And the discovery of their betrayal wasn't my breakdown. It was my breakthrough. This journey wasn't about revenge. It was about reclamation. It was about taking back the narrative of my own life. So if you are out there, and if you feel that quiet, persistent voice in the back of your head telling you that something is wrong, that the reality being presented to you doesn't match the data your soul is collecting, please listen to it. Trust that voice. It isn't paranoia. It is the most sophisticated threat detection system you will ever own. It's your own personal firewall, and it is the one thing no one can ever uninstall. Your story is yours to write. Don't ever let anyone else hold the pen. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or erased, please like this video so more people can find it. Leave a comment below and share your own experiences. It's important we know we're not alone. And please, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so we can continue to share these stories and build a community that listens to and trusts its own voice.